Hi.
We're good.
Yeah.
1 second. Hang on, guys. Having a small difficulty here.
Dang technology.
Every time.
Oh no.
She'll be back. She'll be back.
Okay,
so how's everyone doing?
We are doing great. Thank you, Katie, for asking. How are you?
Doing great. I guess I'll kick off introducing myself while we're waiting for Jameela. We can all take turns. That sound good?
Yeah. Yes. Great job, Katie. Thank you for always being our leader.
Happy to help. We're so happy to have all of you guys here. We're waiting for Jameela to hop back on. So in the meantime, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Katie Howland. I am the executive director of Millie's Bookshelf, which is a humanitarian literacy nonprofit. And we work to mitigate book deserts in refugee settings. I've worked everywhere from the White House to refugee camps to managing a 10-country global health program in sub-Saharan Africa. But my love is really humanitarian work. So for my Aerie project, I will be helping to create the first school library in the history of Sinjar, Iraq, to serve survivors of the Yazidi genocide. So very excited to be here and to talk with all of you about self-care.
Yay.
Awesome.
And hello, can everyone see me?
Yes.
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 Oh my God, that was such a nightmare after the run-up that we had to getting live on. And I would like to praise myself for a moment for not swearing. Even though I knew I was live and all of the words were in my head. So hello everyone and welcome to Aerie. We are here discussing the importance of self-care, and we have so many amazing organizers and change makers with us. And so while I was gone, did you guys introduce yourselves?
Katie did. Yes.
Katie did. Okay, fine. Maya, Caine, will you please tell everyone what it is that you do?
Yes. Hey, everyone. My name is Maya Caine, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of MIVE, which is a fashion tech platform that personalizes and optimizes women's shopping experience online in the absence of a traditional fitting room. We're pre-product, but we're so excited that we're able to partner with Aerie to bring our app to the App Store next year, early next year. So really excited to be here and talk about ways we can improve our self-care, because honestly, something that I'm very much improving for myself.
And Haile Thomas, will you kindly introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yes. Hi, I'm Haile Thomas. I am a wellness and compassion activist, speaker, and the CEO and co-founder of the HAPPY organization, which stands for Healthy, Active, Positive, Purposeful Youth. And we teach plant-based nutrition and self-care education to young people in underserved communities all across the globe. And for our Aerie project, we are really centering our work on bringing self-care education to young people through fun online programming, and we're just so excited to be able to talk about self-care and how important it is for all of us and young people as well.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm on a bit of a delay. I'm having an absolute technology meltdown.
It's a bad day for us all.
And Cassie and Chelsea, will you please tell us what you guys do?
Go first. Hi, everybody. I'm Cassie. I'm Chelsea. Yeah. And we are the founders of Spoonies Unite and mywellnesshub.co. And our mission is to help normalize chronic illness. We're often a misunderstood community and looked over community. And so we really want to change that and normalize living with a chronic illness and do what we can to help you live your best life daily so that you can really have the best quality of life achievable. And one way that we're doing that is with our nonprofit, Spoonies Unite, and we want to pay for or offer financial assistance for all of the wellness treatments that really do make you feel your best in your daily life, like massage, nutrition, Pilates, stuff that's not covered by insurance, but really makes you be able to live life.
And other stuff that we've got going on besides that is we have a podcast, The Real Life Show, Living with a Chronic Illness, where our mission is to share the stories of those living with chronic conditions to help bring that awareness, as well as bring resources to people so they're more easily accessible in a free way. And with mywellnesshub.co, it is our membership in our resource library so that people don't have to spend hours and hours searching on the Googles for things that may or may not work for them. Everything on our website is recommended from fellow Spoonies, fellow chronic illness individuals, and we're just really excited about it.
Amazing. And Kat Lantigua, can you finally just tell us everything it is that you do, that you bring to this world and the success?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Kat Lantigua. I am the founder and CEO of Goddess Council. We are a social wellness club and sisterhood for women looking for deep connection and all things that matter. So Goddess Council really is a premier friendship making space. And I don't just say that because I've made friends there and because I'm leading this, but it really is a community for women who are looking for substance and are looking for connection in a real way that isn't typically found online. And so because of this grant, we were actually able to host over 85 gatherings throughout the pandemic that allowed us to pay facilitators and to create space for all of us to kind of process and be together through all of this. And in September, we actually launched our membership. So now we have a private internet community and a private online space where we can share all of the resources and all the things that are helping us get through this time and are helping us thrive. So that's what I do.
100%. And I wanted to kind of start with you about that, considering this is a year where your work is needed the most. What have you found to be the thing most people have reached out to you for this year? Oh, and by the way, sorry. Yeah, you may know who I am. I have not because it was such a nightmare at the beginning. My name is Jameela Jamil. You might know me from The Good Place, but I also run iWay, which is an organization that I've created in order to destigmatize and demystify mental health issues. It's something that I care about so much. And we have our own podcast, our own YouTube channel. We serve both as a mental health space, but also as an allyship community, because this is a year where the world has learned truly once and for all that we don't know enough about each other's communities. And so rather than shame people for what they don't know, we are just encouraging people to come with us and come and join me in learning. So that's just who I am. And now we're returning to Kat. So, Kat, what would you say you found has been the thing that people have reached out to you most for?
Well, I think, so there's a few layers to this. I think there was the fact that a lot of us were just in shock at how life transformed for us so quickly. So I was living in New York when everything started. And so being in New York and kind of being in that space of panic and like not knowing where to go, the only thing that we could do was just connect online and just talk about how we were feeling. And I think that most folks that have joined our community since the start of the pandemic have just been looking for a space to acknowledge and affirm that this is not normal and that their fears and the things that they're going through isn't just their experience. And as we validate that and as we kind of as a collective talk about our shared experiences, then we can move on from the feeling lonely throughout this to like, all right, how are y'all getting through this? Here are some resources, here are the playlists, here are the things that are helping us manage. And so like everything, social wellness is super important, but it was something that before the pandemic, we weren't necessarily talking about or really prioritizing because we could go out, we could do things. But the moment that we could not actually see people, we realized what happens in the absence of community and what happens when you cannot actually connect with your folks. Mm-hmm. So now I think a lot of people are being more intentional about finding community that feeds them, that sees them, and that they can be themselves throughout that whole experience. So honestly, this time has really just been a lot of women coming to terms with the fact that they need community and that they're going to gift that to themselves because they know that it is not just a luxury, but it's something that they need to survive this whole experience. And I think that at this point, they know they need to integrate it forever, not just to get through the hard times, you know?
Yeah, I think we've all realized that when we talk about returning to the old normal, like what is that? Was that normal? And do we need to create our own new normal? I think it's I think it's really been fascinating to see even the turnaround in myself. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel as though I had the horrible realization that I was more in the rat race than I thought I was. You know, my generation in particular was infected by capitalism. I think post the 2008 depression, we, you know, in particular, were kind of given the responsibility as millennials to go forward and like rebuild the economy and buy and consume and work ourselves to death and never take breaks and never look after our own health. Like the less you slept, like the more of a hustler you were. And I was driving myself into the ground. And one of many lessons I learned this year, I mean, yeah, Katie, you're nodding, like, please feel free to jump in. Like, is that something that you though has also?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Jameela. I mean, I think it's something, especially as people who are entrepreneurs or activists or people who care about social change in the world, it's something very easily to get caught up in and feel like I have to keep grinding every minute of every day because the issues I work on are so important, or there's always more work to do, or I see so-and-so working and achieving at this level, I need to meet them. And that's why I think it's really important to kind of set those boundaries in your day-to-day life about, you know, when am I going to stop working? When am I going to actually schedule time for self-care? Because it's not something that you can kind of do haphazardly. You have to actively address it and strive for it.
100%. Maya, you're a little bit younger than me. And I was wondering how you feel like your generation is being impacted by this moment. What do you feel like is the overall lesson? Because I think my generation are realizing we need to take a step back from capitalism, start to become more aware of our environment, start to become more aware of like how these disparities are impacting us as human beings, how much we're neglecting our communities. What would you say your generation who are being lumped with so much responsibility, how are they feeling right now? Not that they're a monolith, but as the spokesperson that I'm choosing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's been very interesting because I think during this time, a lot of us are recognizing like self-care, pouring into ourselves is very much an evolution. I think we all think that pouring into ourselves can look very similar throughout various stages of our life, but you know, women were always evolving, and so should how we pour into ourselves. So in times like this where you know, we have access to more information, and it could be very overwhelming. It could be very anxiety-driven, and a lot of just horrific things that we're constantly being faced with. It seems like we're very much on the defense all the time. And the things that I think now, when I talk about like an evolution of self-care, is understanding the only offense we have in this time is what we decide to do for ourselves and how we're equipping ourselves to feel better on a mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think that offense is really what's going to drive and prepare us to take on what the world is throwing at us. So I think there's a lot of amazing lessons learned about if we look more inwardly, how can we take more of an offensive stance to what is happening to us in these times. So I know that was definitely a lesson for me. I don't want to assume everyone is having that lesson, but I think just from a lot of the conversations, the connections that I'm having, I see that that's a lot of women are kind of coming to terms with that.
Mm-hmm. And also, Cassie and Chelsea, I want to ask you about what self-care looks like for young people, because I think that until now, when we used to think of self-care, we used to think Gwyneth Paltrow. We used to think very expensive mud masks and massages and, you know, like a week in a retreat. That's what I thought self-care was. And so I was always like, I don't have time for that. I'm not spending my money on that. We think of it very overpriced and also like, you know, predominantly slim, white, wealthy prototype of what wellness, of who wellness is like marketed at and who it is for. Time to engage in it. Can you expand on what you have learned real wellness and self-care is for everyone in a way that like democratizes it?
Yeah, I would love to start by saying I totally viewed self-care the way that you do, or did, I should say. I definitely was like spa day, you know, manicure and everything. And I actually went to a talk that Chelsea was putting on. And in this talk, and I was even late to it, so who knows the good stuff that I missed in the beginning. But I got there, And she was talking about how doing your laundry is self-care, and putting your clothes away is self-care, and going to the grocery store is self-care, because then you've got food in your house, so you don't have to like run after work and grab something, and what are you going to eat, and then not eat food that, or have food that doesn't sit well with you. And in that moment, I just was like really mind blown, like, okay, I've been looking at this completely wrong. And ever since then, it just completely changed my view on what self-care is. So that I had that same kind of epiphany and how we need to change it. And now it's much more, you know, like putting your phone on do not disturb is definitely a form of self-care. Being like, okay, I'm not going to check my email 35 times today. I'm going to not check it after this time or something. And that's really important. And as someone who is chronically ill, we have often a limited amount of energy. And so choosing how we spend that energy, it's really important to like pick the ways that you're going to use it. And I kind of felt like that was something different about the chronic illness community. And I learned that Chelsea has limited energy because she's doing grind culture and she's burning herself out. So then the same practices that I needed for self-care, she actually also needed, which was kind of a nice way that sort of brings everybody together instead of us all having to be so different, you know, trying to find how to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I've always viewed self-care as being, and well, I shouldn't say always, because spa days was kind of my like epitome of self-care for a long time. But I just kind of came to this realization that self-care is anything that allows you to take care of you, which seems like a really obvious definition, but I think we try to put it up on this pedestal that it doesn't need to be, and that it's a lot more in the small little daily actions that we do. And as Cassie mentioned, that grind culture that is so big in our society, I was deep in it. Sometimes I still find myself there. And everyone has limited energy. I don't have a chronic illness, but being able to work with Cassie as closely that we do, I notice when her energy maybe is not as much as it could be like for me, but it still helps me stay in check of just because I could do a little bit more doesn't mean that that's actually the best thing for myself in the long term. Sometimes it is that slowing down and that taking of a break and not doing just that one more thing.
100%. And Haile, as someone who, you know, again, alongside everyone else, is a change maker, has this year, with so much need in the world, with people so desperately looking for a sense of community, looking for answers, looking for help, as someone who is in the position of making that change and probably feeling like you have a duty to service all of these people, how do you take care of yourself? Like, because I think, you know, there's a lot of young activists and change makers and entrepreneurs out there who might be watching this right now, who, again, even if it's not about like getting that, you know, I don't know, that expensive bag or that like most expensive makeup, like I think there are people out there who just really feel like you're not allowed to stop. And, you know, considering this also like social political climate, I know in particular friends of mine are just unsure of when it's okay to step back. How do you look after you?
Absolutely. I think that the kind of pressure that is super overwhelming right now in terms of just constantly showing up and being able to have all the answers is in some ways denying, you know, our humanity. I think that there's a really important piece of acceptance in the fact that A, we don't have all the answers, but also B, that we open ourselves to more clarity of what the best next steps are, or how we can collaborate and support each other when we actually step back and create an inner safe space for ourselves. And I think that that's something that is so important, you know, for my generation and everyone going through this right now. I think we can feel very much obligated to know like what we need to do now, but this entire year has been kind of masked in uncertainty. And I think that's almost compelled me to find the things that I can be certain in. So if that means, you know, my daily morning routine, or actually being willing and open to question myself and why I do certain things, why I react certain ways to different triggers, and how I can either minimize that triggering effect or really do the deep self-work to figure out what that is. And I think that when we look inward and we pour inwardly, it's not at all a selfish thing. I think it actually opens up our capacity to connect with others in more compassionate ways. I think that when we get to know our authentic and human sides, that's when we see that in others, and then we're able to connect through this love and through this seeing each other. And I think that from that place, so much deep change can happen on that individual level. And the reason why I really want to highlight that is because so much of what is out of our control is outside of ourselves, right? But ultimately, I feel like there's this really rich and amazing power within each of us to acknowledge what we can do in any given moment, and then to acknowledge that in others, and to really just empower each other through self-empowerment. So I think that it's intrinsically connected, and just really important to remind ourselves of that.
100%. I love that.
Who said that? I didn't hear that. I also how did you come to that realization? How did you recognize? Even I think it's so hard nowadays. We are in such a chaotic moment, and it feels like every day you wake up to another disaster, another painful reality of the world that we're living in. And Kat and Maya and Haile, in particular, as young Black women who are having to exist on the internet, publicly, and trying to make change, whilst at the same time there is so much that must be emotionally so draining for all of you, that you are looking and you are waking up to, getting on your phone before you even get to your emails. You are taking in all of this, sometimes deeply traumatic information. How would you suggest to young women, in particular young Black women out there who might be watching this, how do you suggest that they in particular take care of themselves? Because God knows that isn't a conversation that we're having enough. How do we teach young Black women to, aside from the fact that our society should protect them, how do they protect themselves, especially given how frantic the news cycle is? Any one of you I can start with you, Kat, if you want.
Oh yeah, sure. This is such a heavy question for me, because this year almost felt like I've honestly never been this traumatized with the level of violence that I've witnessed. And it felt like a vortex, because again, I was living in New York. The protests were happening right outside of my house. I felt like I had to be there, front lines all the time. I had to know what was going on with the police. I felt like I had to be, sharing information in case anybody, went to jail, bail funds, all of this stuff. And it got to the point where my body broke out into hives. And I have never had that kind of response to trauma or to overwhelm before. And that was the moment where I realized my body is literally telling me I am reaching my end, my edge right now, and I cannot continue this way. And so I had to fall all the way down to begin rebuilding myself again, because I realized, similarly to what Haile is saying, and that's so wise, everything you said was so wise, because if I am not full, if I am not regulated, if my nervous system is out of whack, if I literally cannot wake up without anxiety on my chest, what good am I to anyone? Because any information I share, any resources that I share are going to be wrapped up in that anxiety. And the last thing that I want to do is to share information in panic and from a place of fear, because my sisters, my Black friends, my Black family, were already stressed out. That why would I go online and make it worse? Because for a lot of people in my life, I'm their grounding force, or I'm their grounding energy. And if I'm not regulated, then they often feel oh my God, if Kat's freaking out, then what don't I know? And I don't want to be that person. And I think that that's a really important place for me to have come to with my social media account. I did not realize how much I impacted people's energy. I didn't realize that I can make somebody's day worse with what I share.
How did you find out?
Because people kind of told me. Not because they were why did you say this? But wow, I didn't even think about it this way. You're so right. It is bad. It is this, it's that. And it would make them spiral, because they really appreciated my perspective. And when I started to spiral, they thought they had to spiral too. Mm-hmm. And that's not fair for me to do. And so I've been doing what Haile what she just alluded to, which is just scaling back, and sitting with myself, making sure that I'm okay and getting my life together, to the point where I literally packed up my life in Brooklyn and just moved to Austin, and I live in like a little forest now, because this is what I had to do for myself, because that's how deregulated I was. And I know that that's not the answer for everyone, but like that's what self-care looked like for me at this point, given how extreme this year has kind of, gone into. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. I don't know if that resonates with y'all, with you and with Maya and Haile, but
Maya, I mean, you were nodding, you were snapping.
Yeah. Ooh, you were preaching there, Kat. I felt the exact same way in terms of just, especially with social media, just building so much anxiety, just anger, and every time. And I felt like I had this obligation to share information, to do as much as I can, and kind of just like hold this weight. Okay, I'm Black. If I want affect other lives of Black people, I needed to be doing, way more to spread the message. And I felt like it was to the point where I had so much anxiety, and even engaging in conversations with people about the issues that I care about were super defensive. I was just so nerve-wracking, angry. My delivery probably wasn't the best. And I think that the best way for me to deal with that is like pouring into myself, not getting caught in the social media spiral, but really just the best way to prepare for the movement was pouring into myself so I can approach the issues that I care about with a more stable mindset, more confidence, I was finding out when all the protests were happening, I wasn't even eating. There were so many things that just spiraled out of control in my life. So it's like I had to ground myself first so I can be a better pillar of the movement. And educate others. And I think is a big thing is this obligation that we all carry. Just because like our skin color, we think we're obligated to do X, Y, and Z. We're obligated to educate. Everyone has resources to read, to educate themselves, I hated the whole idea of, hey, educate me on racism, educate me on all this stuff. And that was also eating away at my spirit, my mental health. So I think, sorry, Siri tried to come up. I think just setting those boundaries and realizing that all that the obligation, knowing that obligation doesn't rest on your shoulders, and just finding healthy ways as an outlet. So everything Haile said, Kat said, absolutely.
100%. And also, you touched on this kind of feeling of obligation, and God knows that Black women have been historically at the forefront of so many important movements throughout history. And I feel like so many of us, and in particular just women, we are expected to carry everything. And all change makers are also expected, and I want to know if this resonates with you, but if you come out and you say, I care about anything, just one thing passionately, then everyone says, well, now you must care about everything. And you must on social media to every single cause all around the world. And I understand, by the way, where people are coming from, because they're so desperate for someone to fight for the thing that they believe in. But at the same time, we are not always helpful, diluting ourselves and our attention and our effectiveness in 100 different directions. I think it's really important as young change makers that we are economic, we're careful with where we are, and also intentional with where we direct all of our energy. And so it doesn't just have to be on one cause, but there's this new kind of trend of guilt tripping people online, especially those who profess to care and to actually want to make a difference. That now you care? Okay, see how much you care. Let's see how vast your global historical knowledge is, and if you are fighting for everyone. I don't think that that's a healthy or organized way to actually create thoughtful change. And I hope that anyone out there knows that it is amazing for you to show up for any cause, but just make sure that it goes beyond the retweet and the like. And I think if we try to show everyone that we care about everything, it's not possible for us to be effective. And it's so important that you actually dedicate yourself beyond a like or beyond a retweet to specific causes, and really show up and follow up and make sure that you are engaging other people and educating other people. Something that Rachel Cargill, who I love, said to me is that the word influencer has been destroyed by social media because we think influencer means you have to have a certain amount of followers in order to be someone who can change the world. And that's so not true. Like, everyone watching this right now has the power to be a change maker. If you have access to even one person that you can influence or educate or change the mind of, you are an influencer. And I think that that's a wonderful way to look at things, because you realize that you have to be famous or have 10K plus followers. You can really change the world by yourself. I call it brick by brick activism. But also then it puts less pressure on people like us who are on this panel to feel like we have to do everything for everyone. I started asking a question and then we all kind of started talking, but how and when did you learn how to identify those triggers? Because I feel like that's something that I've only really been able to do in the last couple of years, to even know amidst all of this chaos what is me and what is what's happening in the world.
I don't know. I think, are you asking me? I'm sorry, I had like a weird delay. Okay, so I think in identifying, kind of what's the external influence and what is truly ourselves, I think that it requires vulnerability. And I think that a lot of the things that stress us out externally and internally, we aren't really like vulnerable with just the feeling of stress or the feeling of overwhelm or just like accepting that current feeling and moment. And I think that when we lean into acceptance more often, that's where our true selves start to come out. And maybe parts of our true selves may be damaged, traumatized, whatever it is, but I think underneath that is where our gifts lie, and I think our true spirit is. And so even just disconnecting from social media for a while, disconnecting from all the external noises and voices, even books, like I will usually always try to take in information, but when I pause and actually see like, what am I like without all of these influences and things that are, telling me to think this way or do this or whatever it may be, that's where I find myself. And I think that when we kind of pour into those moments to find ourselves, to listen to ourselves, to, when there's a triggering moment, instead of trying to push that to the side and, just get over it as fast as possible, when we actually like infuse ourselves in that moment, I think we can really get to know ourselves better. And even, with all of the traumatic and horrible things that have been happening this year, I think that the power has been in creating spaces for peace and just kind of integrating everything that we're learning and becoming aware of, but also figuring out ways in which we can use our gifts and talents and creativity to show up authentically. I think that's a really big thing, at least, for like Gen Z and even millennials and, generations that are, more inclined to do activism work. We can kind of look at this blueprint, like this is what change making looks like, and feel as though we have to mold ourselves into that identity of a change maker. But when we just open ourselves to think, what am I passionate about? What lights me up? And then how does that connect to an issue that I see in the world, something that I'm passionate about? And I think that when we bring our gifts and our light to a lot of the darkness that we're seeing, that's when we start to come into ourselves more. And so creativity is so nourishing for me, and vulnerability paired with creativity, I think they're kind of, they're one and the same in many ways. And so when we are just in our being, I think that's when we start to learn more about ourselves and express ourselves authentically and not feel that weight of the world, knowing that we're moving in divine ways.
100%. Cassie and Chelsea, I want to talk to you about practical care, especially Cassie, as someone with a chronic illness, I know what I imagine you have had to expose yourself to so much information around nutrition and all of the kind of more holistic. Chelsea's laughing.
I've just talked to Cassie so many times about experiences she's had of people coming up to her and being like, well, have you tried yoga? Did you drink the green juice? Mm-hmm. And I can see Katie's like freaking out too, because it's just something that I think.
We did a whole episode on our podcast about like the best way to support a spoonie, because it is really hard when you've tried all the things. I feel like I want you to finish asking whatever question you were going to ask me.
That's fine. This is informal. Like, this is us having with the rest of like the Aerie crowd. So
okay. So
like just jump in whenever.
Yeah. Haley, like, oh my God, you're so amazing. You're so wise, you know? And I was sitting here like, yes, I seriously was sitting here like, yes, I'm so passionate about this. We are going to change the world, you know? And I'm like, and I'm creative, and I feel more passionate, and I feel more creative just by talking to Haley. But yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly it. Like, having a chronic illness, and yes, like nutrition and the information and taking everything in. And then you're also kind of like trying to navigate what resonates with you, what might work, what you should have hope with when you're feeling like there is no hope, or having to like defend yourself, you know. Oh my gosh. I mean, that is like a whole conversation in itself. Like, the invisible illness stigma can just be so hard sometimes. And people not what, Katie?
I said amen.
Yes.
Like, truly, I have an invisible illness, and the internet accused me of having, like, you're faking it in Munchausen because I look so well on the outside. Trust me, the queen of understanding being passionate about your health.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge thing. And part of like you guys were talking about, like, sharing your story and knowing that what you're sharing kind of has an impact. Chelsea and I made a very conscious decision, and especially because I'm the one with the chronic illness out of our duo, about being really authentic and raw. And so I have posted like very personal things on our social media, like a picture of me on the toilet, you know, and I like post stories about my body and its functions. And because that's the stuff that, like, we all get it. I mean, you know, that post had so many comments on it of people being like, how many of us are totally like sitting on the toilet? We're looking at this post right now. I mean, let's be honest. And just what it's like. And
the toilet right now.
Right?
No.
Yeah. And it's not talked about. It is shamed. And then there's a whole element of body shaming that goes along with it, you know, and, oh, you know, well, maybe if you lose weight, then you won't have this illness, or this, that, and the other. And so it's really difficult. And we're really passionate about sharing what it's really like, all the nitty gritty stuff, all the difficult stuff. And we have found so much connection with people that way, and had people reach out on DMs that they're just like, oh my gosh, you know, I thought I was the only one that felt that way, or like you talking about that or showing that. It just, and same on our podcast, because again, like, no filter over here. And that's really important to us, to try and have an impact in the chronic illness community and hopefully filter out, because it's not just about only people with chronic illness. Like, Chelsea was just wanting to support those of us who have it. And, you know, now look where we are, trying to make a change. And it truly is about both sides, because we need understanding. And when we are judged so much, especially like, I don't know, having an invisible illness, or, you know, even people who have a visible illness or disability, it's just, there's a lot of shame around it. And so having people out there who are not experiencing the same thing, just having compassion and understanding and validation, and just saying, I believe you, I hear you, or maybe not even believe, like, you don't have to prove it to me. I just, yes, that's your experience, and just accepting it. We need more of that in the world, just accepting that people are going through things and that's their experience. That's it.
And I think that because each chronic illness experience is so individualized, that our goal isn't so much to be like, oh, this is what's going to help you. Because just because we did an episode on taking cold showers because it helps Cassie, and because I love her, I took cold showers too.
She didn't want to.
No. My self-care is hot showers. But we want to give education of options that could help, because whether you have an illness or you don't, coming back to kind of self-care and practical things, is you need to figure out what works for you.
Oh yeah, I forgot what we were talking about. That's okay. What it was. It was practical tips.
This is our podcast.
I was just like chatting with everybody.
But like, you need to figure out what works for you.
Like, we were going to talk about practical tips, but I also just wanted to say that something that I admire about everyone on this panel is the fact that, you know, not just today, but generally within all of our work, we try to be as transparent and as human and as humane as possible. And I think that that is so vital, because it's good for us to get this off our chest, but B, it frees the people who look at our content or who listen to our work to then also feel empowered to do the same, and to not feel ashamed that sometimes they can't cope, to understand that like all of us are stressing out. We all are having like panic attacks and anxiety and depression. My mental health has been like a roller coaster this year. And like, you know, a lot of our bodies are changing. My body's changing. I'm not getting out as much as I used to. So I feel like my mental health has definitely taken like an extra battering from the fact that I'm no longer as active as I was able to be before. We are suffering with loneliness. Some of us are stuck with family members that we were not with, or, you know, there are all kinds of awkward situations where some people are far away from their families. We are lonely, or we are missing love, or we are missing affection. And if we don't come out and talk about it, then how can we deal with it? How can we heal? How can we move through these things if we feel embarrassed about saying it is so human? And I find it crazy this year that we have felt from influences online, which is why I was so excited to talk to all of you today, because you are so not like that, but people who are pressuring others online to feel as though you have to come out of this with like a pandemic body. What is a pandemic body?
It's just a body. It's any body.
Right? It's a beach body. You know, they've now turned it into you have to lose the COVID-19, 19 pounds, 19 abs. I have 0 abs. I will never have abs, especially not at the end of this moment. And they want us to come out with like 15 different skills, and we're going to come out of this a boss bitch. Like, honestly, I just want to be an alive bitch at the end of this. Pardon my French. But that is just something that I feel. And so I really respect where you went with that, with the fact that you try to just be transparent and authentic. And I think that's where now social media is going. I don't think people want to see the veneer anymore. I don't think they want to see that photoshopped nonsense, like highlight reel that has until now dominated social media. I think people want what is true. I think that's why people are turning up to this chat. I think that's why people care about Aerie. They're like, no, but I think it all kind of comes through. The authenticity is what's is really what we need to move forward as a society. These lies and this pretense is making us all super mentally ill. But yeah, quickly, because I do definitely also want to make. Oh yeah, no, go on, Kat. No, sorry, Katie. I took your pardon.
No, I just wanted to add on to that because I think it's a really important point. When I was actually invited to be on this panel, I was a little taken aback, frankly, because my mental health has been horrible in this past year, probably the worst it's ever been. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, but it's basically something that is when your brain is coping with too much trauma, too much stress. It'll physically rewire your pathways. And I've been having mentally induced seizures for a year. And I bring this up because I think it's really important as a change maker, as someone who is trying to be really activist oriented, that we are very in tune about these things about ourselves. We're very in tune with what is filling our cup up versus pouring it out. Because the first thing I learned when I got diagnosed and I had to start kind of addressing the fact that I wasn't taking care of myself was that a lot of the things that I thought were filling my cup up weren't. And there were some friends who I loved dearly, but when I called them, I left more stressed than when I was not talking to them. Or when I was playing a video game that I thought was super fun. And I realized that really in Animal Crossing, I was just stressing about getting the next mermaid recipe from Pascal, you know, like, and I know that's kind of funny, but you know, I think it's so important now more than ever that we are critically evaluating what is actually moving ourselves in a direction towards self-care versus what are we just doing because it's what we think self-care looks like.
Also, like, hands up if during this time you've also realized that maybe some of the people in your life, when the pandemic ends and the world reopens, maybe don't need to be in your life. I think this year has been incredibly telling, and I think that that's also something that's okay. Like, we don't, especially as women, we are expected to be likable and liked by everyone. We are expected to like everyone. We are expected to nurture and look after everyone. And so we are never told that it's okay to actually create boundaries for yourself. It's okay
absolutely.
away from what's toxic, and that it's not just things that can be toxic. Sometimes it's people. You know, when it comes to social media, I'm definitely employing a very kind of like block, mute, delete, repeat, because I realize that some things I just don't need to look at. Like, there's enough for me to feel terrible about in the world. I shouldn't be deliberately following it. Also, there are some people in my life who I realize like didn't call, or who I didn't have maybe the urge to call, or maybe there were toxic things in our relationship that I feel like this break has been good for me, and maybe I need to take that break a little bit longer. And so, you know, for anyone out there who is kind of struggling with that feeling, I want you to know you're not a bad person, and that this moment of clarity, as much trauma as it has brought, it's also the smallest gift. Because we have a moment where the world has stood slightly still for a second, and we've been forced to stay in our houses and reckon with what we need to do next. Like, when we return to this, to the world, who are we going to be, and who are we going to be standing with, and what are we going to stand for? Chelsea and Cassie, I would love to just hear from you some quick kind of tips, though, practical tips. Like, for example, I've just started walking, like I'm doing the 10,000 steps a day, which is such an arbitrary number, but that's what I've chosen. And that's really like in a way that I'd hear people going on about it, and I was like, yeah, shut up. But I my life. Aside from bits of exercise, is there any other tips that you've been doling out?
So I have 5 things, like 5 categories of things that I try to focus on every day and every week. One of them is movement. Cassie and I both teach Pilates, and we love it. It's the best thing for my body personally. I know Cassie really enjoys it too. Do Pilates, it's amazing. But besides just moving my body, fueling my body with foods that make me feel good. Like, I like Chick-fil-A sometimes, but it doesn't always make me feel amazing. So maybe don't eat it all the time. Drinking lots of water, making sure that I'm taking care of rest. So whether that's sleeping, taking breaks during the day, setting those boundaries. Also working on just managing my stress, which for me has to be a lot of time management. Am I putting too much into my day? Am I not leaving that time for that rest? And then lastly, working on my mindset. I think that the way we talk to ourselves is really the deepest form of self-care that you can actually give yourself. And if you're having a lot of negative self-talk, then it doesn't matter how many massages and spa days and trips or vacations or days off you take, but you're still not going to feel good on the inside. So working on that internal dialogue to make it more positive can make a huge difference. So if I kind of do something on all of those things every day, every week, then that has helped me kind of stay on track a little bit better.
Amazing.
So I would love to add that I have not been good at basically any of those things.
Okay, you don't have to always be good.
And just to share, you know, just like for the flip side, we kind of balance each other out because we really need different things for our self-care. I really struggled with a lot of what all of you guys have talked about with the negativity, the anxiety, the depression, the social media, like all that stuff. And I found that me like shutting everything off at night and reading before bed has been huge, because when you're reading, you cannot multitask. And it's like one of the only ways that I can find that I can shut my brain off. So I definitely recommend like picking up a book, because you really can't, or you'll read the same page over and over. And meditation.
Book though, don't read an amazing book.
Right. Yeah.
Or a book that's going to make you horny. Like, read a boring.
Yeah. Yeah. And meditation was also really huge for me. I had a lot of kind of like nervous system stuff, and it really helped me to like chill the F out. And I do want to just add, for anyone out there who's like also a parent, I'm a single mom. I have a 12-year-old son. And during this whole time with the pandemic, it's been really important for me to show him and teach him that it's okay to just chill out. You know, there's a lot of pressure on the kids right now too. And sometimes it's kind of like, oh, they're kids, they'll bounce back, they'll be fine. But they're really affected also. And I kind of decided, like, I want him to grow up and know that he can take a step back and rest. Or when he has a wife or a husband of his own, they can chill out and rest, and that's okay. And so I've tried to really, that has held me accountable for like taking care of myself and finding those practical things that do work, and drinking lots of water and taking some of Chelsea's tips, and yeah.
And Cassie holds me accountable because she knows that I have a tendency to be a workaholic, and so she yells at me when I'm texting her about something at 10:30 at night.
Yeah.
100%. I think sleep is for me the thing that makes or breaks my mental and physical health. I can't believe how much it transforms my life, and it's something that we don't put enough importance on, and we also don't understand how these phones, the blue light that we look into is literally telling our brains, like, it's awake time, we're in the club. That's it. Good morning, you've just had a coffee. Another really important thing just to add is that I think a lot of people don't understand about how our brains work is just the fact that when we are taking in stresses online, often which we find via technology, via social media, when we're taking in those stresses, any kind of stress, it could be from online trolling to just reading horrifying things in the news or seeing traumatic pictures or images that maybe you weren't prepared for or didn't need to see in your day. I think we all know what I'm referring to. I think that most people don't understand that our brains haven't evolved from when we were kind of cavemen and women and people, so we think everything is maximum dangerous. So when we see a stressor, our body responds as if we are in maximum danger, as if there is like a saber-toothed tiger in front of us and we have no windows or walls or weapons to defend ourselves. And so because of that, you have to be extra careful about what you are looking at online and what you are taking in from the world. You really need to step back and give yourself big breaks, because otherwise your body is like, your adrenals are getting exhausted because you are releasing like cortisol and insulin. You're in like fight or flight basically all the time. And so understand that none of us as change makers, both the people on this panel but people outside of this, are any good to this world if we are dead, if we are burned out. And that was like, Kat, you were alluding to that earlier, that like if we don't pace ourselves, then that's it. We'll just fry, and then we can't help anyone, or we're not here anymore. Katie, do you have any kind of lasting advice that you have learned as a change maker that you would like to give to those who are watching this today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to recognize is that you can't, and the first thing that I've recognized as someone who's been battling my own mental health issues, you can't help other people if you don't first take care of yourself. And that's not something that you can only pay attention to once you've kind of fallen off the wagon. It's something, Liz Gilbert is one of my favorite authors of all time. And she has this quote that says, happiness is not something that just kind of descends upon you. You have to fight for it and strive for it every day. And mental health and self-care are the exact same thing. You have to make conscious decisions each day to advance your mental health, to protect yourself, and to therefore protect your ability to help other people in the world. And I think, I was always very anti-meditation, but after my mental health problems, I started looking back into the scientific literature behind it. And Jameela, you mentioned that kind of fight or flight mode. Meditation has been scientifically proven to shrink the size of your amygdala in your brain, which is the fight or flight center. And there are other strategies as well if you're not into meditation.
Oh God, mine must be like a raisin by now. I don't even know if mine is still in there.
I mean, you might be a little worried about coming into a saber-toothed tiger encounter at that point, but yeah, no, I think it's just important to find those strategies, and it's going to be different for each person. So don't be afraid to experiment and listen to your body, and that way you can be a greater help to the world.
100%. All right, I'm going to go through all of you and just ask you each for one piece of advice that you would like to leave everyone with today. Hands up, who would like to go first? Do you want me to go first while you're thinking? Okay, I'll give one piece of advice, especially when it comes to the image, your body, or what you think you are achieving in this world. If you find that you are saying anything in your head that you would not tolerate being said to somebody that you love, you have to stop saying these things. You are not allowed to talk to yourself in a way that you wouldn't tolerate someone you love being spoken to. It's so important that we understand that there are enough stressors out in this world, enough kind of enemies or enough people who are trying to convince us that we're not good enough. We cannot participate in that narrative. We have to be our own best friends. So that's my hopeful takeaway for anyone out there that I still have to remind myself of daily. Would anyone else like to join? Yes?
Yeah.
You go first, Cass.
I was just going to say, I loved that. I love everything in this hour. I would love to say, just be yourself. And then when you are being yourself with everyone around you being who you really are, then you know that everyone with you is people that you want to be around. You know, they love you for you. And it kind of just gets to eliminate a whole wave of like insecurity and anxiety that's totally unnecessary. And you can just keep going, living, being you.
100%.
And I was going to say, get to know yourself, check in with yourself, listen to those thoughts. For a long time, I thought that I was more extroverted than introverted because my job is doing stuff like this and talking to people and putting myself out there. And especially just everything that's been going on this year, I realized that in order to energize myself to fill up my own cup, that I'm an introvert and I need time by myself. I need time with a good book. And so being really intentional with that and knowing that the things that you need to take care of you might change over time. So just always checking in with you, getting to know yourself a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point.
I would say, I guess I would say this specifically to my Black friends and family and community who are watching this, like rest, because our rest is an act of resistance. As we rest and as we are well, that in and of itself is an act of resistance, because that means we can thrive and we can stay present and be here, which oftentimes feels really, really hard to do. So reclaim your rest and reclaim your time and take all the naps you want.
And reclaim your joy. I know that a lot of my friends, especially those who are Black women in the activist space, are guilty about having joy and having rest and you know, and enjoying some abundance. And so it's important for you to realize that we need you to have that so that you will fill your cup back up.
Yeah.
Maya?
Yes, I would. I'm surprised I can go through a whole hour without having a Shrek reference, but I'm going to make it now. So I think of just like yourself, and how Cassie mentioned earlier, like really getting to know yourself. And like if you think of yourself as an onion, like you have to pull back so many layers. Like self-care is really this rebuilding process of, okay, pulling back the layer of feeling obligated to talk to people, pulling out the layer of too much time on social media, and all these habits. You literally have to pull all of those back and really try to rebuild and like, you know, pack yourself with a lot of good things, healthy eating, drinking water, getting rest, and all these things. So just think of it as like a reconstruction period for you. And you're going to have to pull a lot of things back, to build it up with things that are going to pour into you, that are going to pack you and make you feel full. So I think it's really a huge time investment. But I think, you know, it obviously provides dividends on yourself, your well-being, and your outlook on the world.
So well said. Haile?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everyone, and it's been nourishing in such a wonderful way just to hear this and know that each of you are like putting this light out into the world and sharing all of this information. But I think really the most important thing, one of the most important things, is just intentionality, and I think that every action of self-care is rooted in some type of intention. And so when we're really clear on why we're engaging with things and able to understand how it's impacting us. So even, you know, in my life, I've put timers on social media. So I only have like 30 minutes to be on Instagram every day. And I can't believe I've been able to do this. But knowing that I have this certain intentional time period to use this platform and this tool and connector, I find myself using it in ways that are so much more nourishing for myself and also those who I touch through that platform. And so I think that when we just dive into intentionality and introspection and, you know, check in on ourselves, ask ourselves how we're doing, not waiting for anyone to check in, but also knowing that we can do that for ourselves and reflecting on how we're feeling, reflecting on how we want to impact the energy and emotions of others in our lives and how we want to do that for ourselves. I think that is so powerful, and it's a tool that's accessible to all of us to just stop and really sit in where we're at in the current moment, and to be just mindful of how we're moving through the world and through any moment. And, you know, it sounds a lot simpler than it actually is in practice. I think, to really be aware, but I think in awareness, there's so much power. And also I found myself leaning towards utilizing my free will in a very different way. So sometimes when I'll be like super stressed out, I'll just like start jumping or like doing random movements and just realizing that I'm here, all is well, I'm safe, and I'm in this amazing human body. I have the strength, the capacity to get through whatever moment is happening. And I don't know, just leaning into this silliness and kind of releasing a lot of the stress and just holding tight to everything has helped me find peace as well.
100%. Okay, we are coming to the end of our hour. I could talk to you guys all night. I can't believe how fast that went by. Thank you so much, not only for what you've said today and how helpful you've been and how insightful you all are, and how much I wish I'd heard this conversation when I was 12 or 13, or even just in March. You are all such phenomenal human beings, and we are so lucky to have had this time with all of you today. Thank you for chatting so openly and humanely with me. I hope everyone who's watching this has enjoyed this and goes to follow these incredible human beings online and support all of their work, because they are really doing the work to make this world a better place, and we can all figure out how to support one another as we go on through what is truly just the weirdest year, hopefully, of any of our lives. May it never get worse or weirder than this. Thank you so much to Katie, to Chelsea, to Cassie, to Kat, to Maya, to Haile. It has been such a pleasure and an honor, and so much love to everyone out there who has joined us for this Aerie Real Talk about how to really take care of yourself, especially when you're a change maker. And may we all walk through this world as change makers as we go forward. Thank you guys so much with all of the love. And I'm sorry I said the word horny in this. We don't believe in shame in this circle. So,
safe space.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.